She died with a secret and left behind 3 little girls to carry it. The man in the black coat. The wind howled low across the wide expanse of Green Hill Cemetery in western Rhode Island, carrying with it the scent of dried leaves and earth. The skies above were clouded in pale gray, and the chill in the air was the kind that sank deep into the bones, the kind that made silence feel heavier than usual. Near the center of the cemetery, a funeral had just concluded. Dozens of mourners stood scattered around a modest, freshly dug grave. The casket had already been lowered. A few final words had been spoken, but most people had already turned away, returning to their cars, their coats drawn tight against the wind. Except for one man. He stood still, unmoving, as though his shoes had rooted themselves to the ground. He was tall, in his early 40s, wearing a long black wool coat over a tailored dark suit. His hair was thick, dark brown, streaked with silver at the temples, neatly combed. His name was Lucas Hartman, and though none of the remaining mourners seemed to recognize him or approach him, he was not just another acquaintance of the deceased. He was something else entirely. Lucas had not known about the funeral until 3 days ago. In fact, he hadn't even known that Eva Langston, the woman whose name was now etched in cold stone, had passed away, until the obituary reached him through an old university alumni newsletter, a place where he had once seen her name mentioned with professional pride, not finality. The moment he saw her name in that small black box beneath the headline "In Loving Memory," something inside him cracked open. He hadn't spoken to Eva in almost 9 years. And yet, there he was, at her grave, dressed in black, his gloved hands clenched in front of him, his eyes fixed on the mound of dirt that now covered the only woman who had ever made him consider turning away from the future he had chosen for himself. Lucas had built an empire, CEO of Hartman Strategies, a global consulting firm with offices in 4 countries, and clients that included Fortune 100 companies and foreign governments. He was powerful, calculated, and always in control. But today, at Eva's funeral, Lucas felt none of that. He didn't feel powerful. He felt hollow. Eva had been unlike anyone he'd ever met. A free spirit, whip-smart, and unafraid to challenge him. She had been a literary professor at Columbia, an essayist, and a believer in the kind of truths that didn't show up in spreadsheets. Their relationship had been brief, intense, and real, until he had walked away, choosing London, choosing ambition, choosing not to look back. At the time, it had felt necessary. Now, it felt like betrayal. Lucas turned slightly as a movement caught the corner of his eye. Across the lawn, half hidden behind a cluster of tall elms, stood 3 small figures, children, girls, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They stood close together, shoulder to shoulder, like a single unit, identical coats, deep blue with silver buttons, identical auburn hair tied back in matching braids. Even their posture mirrored one another's, hands clasped in front of them, heads tilted slightly. Triplets. Lucas blinked. He didn't remember seeing them during the service. Something about them unsettled him. Not in fear, but in familiarity. They didn't look like anyone he knew, but they looked like Eva. The shape of their cheeks, the soft curve of their brows, the intensity in their gaze. One of them, the one on the right, stepped forward, just half a pace, then stopped. Lucas instinctively took a small step forward too. But before a word could leave his lips, the 3 turned, in perfect unison, and disappeared behind the trees. "Mr. Hartman," a quiet voice broke through the stillness. It was the driver, James, who had accompanied Lucas from Manhattan. An older gentleman, trusted, discreet. "The car is ready when you are." Lucas didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed on the place where the girls had stood. "Did you see them?" he asked quietly. James followed his gaze. "The children?" "Yeah," Lucas said. "3 of them. Same coats, same everything." James nodded. "They were standing there through most of the service. Thought maybe family, but no one else seemed to notice them." Lucas turned back to Eva's grave. They looked like her. James didn't reply. Some silences didn't need to be filled. That night, back in his Manhattan penthouse, Lucas couldn't sleep. He had tried, more than once, but each time he closed his eyes, the same image returned. The 3 girls standing together in eerie stillness, watching, waiting, or maybe saying goodbye. By midnight, he had given up on sleep altogether. He sat in his study, the city lights of New York glimmering behind him, and stared at a photo of Eva. It was an old picture, one he had tucked away in a book and forgotten. In it, she was laughing, her hand resting on his chest, a rooftop bar behind them. Their last summer together, their last night before he flew to London. He hadn't known she was pregnant. Had she been? The question echoed through him like thunder in a canyon. It felt too wild to be true. And yet, triplets. 8 years old. The math added up. Too perfectly. "Eva," he whispered, "what didn't you tell me?" He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he hadn't used in years. Delia Maddox, Eva's best friend, fellow professor, godmother to maybe no one, or maybe 3 someones. He hesitated, then dialed. It rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. "Hello? Delia, it's Lucas." A pause, a sharp breath, then, cool and clipped, "Lucas Hartman. Now there's a name I didn't think I'd hear again." "I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Eva died 3 weeks ago," Delia said. "You just finding out now?" "I didn't know. I live in London. I've been traveling." Another pause. "What do you want, Lucas?" "I went to her funeral. Today." Silence. "I saw 3 girls there," he continued. "Triplets. They looked a lot like Eva." Delia said nothing. "I need to know," he said. "Were they hers?" Still silence, but this time it was heavy with meaning. "Yes," Delia said finally. Her voice had softened, just slightly. "They're hers." Lucas felt the air leave his lungs. "And mine?" Another long silence. "I'm not the one who should answer that." "Delia, talk to Charlotte," she interrupted. "Eva's sister. The girls are with her now. They live in Providence. But tread carefully, Lucas. You walked away once. They've lived with that absence their whole lives." She hung up. Lucas sat frozen, the line dead in his hand. Triplets, daughters, his. The next morning, Lucas Hartman sat in his kitchen, staring into a cup of black coffee gone cold. The usual hum of the city outside his window, car horns, distant sirens, footsteps on the pavement, was nothing more than static in his mind. His thoughts kept circling back to the cemetery, to those 3 girls with auburn braids and matching coats, to the name he hadn't heard in nearly a decade, but now couldn't stop thinking about, Eva Langston. He pulled out his laptop and typed quickly, "Charlotte Langston, Providence, Rhode Island." It didn't take long. She was listed as a licensed child psychologist, working at a local middle school. There was an address, a phone number. Lucas leaned back in his chair. There had been so many moments in his life when he'd acted with absolute certainty. Acquisitions, deals, press appearances. But this was different. This wasn't about strategy or returns. This was about truth, about loss, about responsibility, and maybe about second chances. He called his assistant and canceled his week's meetings. Every single one. The merger could wait. The Tokyo trip would be postponed. For once, his future could wait. That afternoon, Lucas drove himself to Providence. He hadn't driven his own car in years. He was always chauffeured, but something about today made him want to be the one behind the wheel. The road curved through the wooded towns and suburban quiet before entering the heart of the small city. He pulled up in front of a modest townhouse on a tree-lined street that looked like it had stood unchanged for 50 years. A young girl opened the front door before he even reached it. She was small, no taller than his waist, with bright green eyes and the same auburn hair as the girls at the cemetery. She stared at him, suspicious, curious. Behind her, two more identical faces appeared. He didn't need confirmation. These were his daughters. "Girls, inside please," a voice called from behind the door. A woman in her mid-40s stepped forward. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her eyes were sharp, guarded. She looked tired, but also strong, in the way that only people who've carried other people's pain can be. "You must be Charlotte," Lucas said. She nodded slowly. "And you must be Lucas Hartman." The girls didn't retreat like she asked. They stood close, peeking from behind the door frame. Lucas kept his voice low. "May I speak with you?" "Just for a moment." Charlotte glanced back at the girls. "Inside, now." The triplets obeyed, reluctantly. She stepped out onto the porch and crossed her arms. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Lucas blinked. "Eva told you about me?" "She didn't need to. I figured it out when the birth certificates came back with the father line blank, and the girls turned out looking like a certain high-powered executive from New York I remembered seeing in her college photos." He swallowed. "Why didn't she tell me?" Charlotte's expression softened, just slightly. "Because Eva didn't want to be a burden to anyone, and she didn't want you to feel trapped. She made a decision, right or wrong, to raise them on her own. She worked 2 jobs. She taught night classes, and when she got sick, she kept going. For them." Lucas lowered his gaze. "I didn't even know she was ill. She didn't tell many people, not even me at first. She didn't want pity. She didn't want your money. She wanted to protect them from feeling like they were someone's afterthought." "I didn't abandon them," he said quietly. "I just didn't know they existed." Charlotte nodded. "I believe you, but the girls don't know who you are. They just lost their mother. They're grieving. The last thing they need is another upheaval." "I'm not here to take them away," Lucas said. "I just want to be a part of their lives, somehow. Even if they never call me Dad." Charlotte studied him for a long time, then said, "Come back tomorrow at 4. You can meet them properly, but don't say anything about who you are. Not yet. Let them decide when they're ready." Lucas nodded. "Thank you." He turned to leave, but before he reached the sidewalk, a small voice called after him. "Hey!" He turned. One of the girls, he couldn't tell which one, was standing at the door. She had a purple hair tie and wide, curious eyes. "You were at the funeral, weren't you?" "Yes," Lucas said gently. "I was." She nodded. "You looked sad." He felt a lump rise in his throat. I was. She looked like she might say something more, but then Charlotte appeared behind her and guided her back inside. Lucas stood there for a long moment, then walked back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, not turning the ignition. 8 years. He had missed 8 years. And yet, somehow, something told him this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The next day, he arrived at precisely 4 o'clock. Charlotte greeted him at the door, this time with a nod instead of suspicion. She led him into the living room, where the girls sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring. "This is Mr. Hartman," Charlotte said. "He knew your mother a long time ago." 3 pairs of eyes turned toward him. 3 expressions, each similar and yet so clearly distinct. "I'm Sadie," the one with the purple tie said proudly. "I'm Sophie," said the one in blue. "And I'm Serena," said the third, the most reserved. "Nice to meet you," Lucas said, his voice soft. "Do you like dogs?" Sadie asked, without hesitation. "I do," he replied. "Do you like chocolate chip pancakes?" Sophie added. "Absolutely." Serena said nothing, just watched him carefully, as if she were trying to read between his words. Charlotte offered him tea and sat nearby, letting the conversation unfold. They talked about small things: favorite books, school projects, ballet class. Lucas listened more than he spoke. Every word, every glance from them felt like something precious being handed to him slowly. When it was time to leave, Sadie tugged on his sleeve. "You can come again," she said, "but next time, bring a picture of Mommy, one we haven't seen." Lucas smiled through the ache in his chest. "I'll try." As he walked back to his car, Charlotte followed. "They like you," she said quietly, "especially Sadie." "I can't explain it," Lucas said, "but I feel like I've known them forever." "They'll ask questions soon," she warned. "They're smart. They'll put the pieces together." "I'll wait," Lucas promised. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Charlotte nodded, then added softly, "You may have missed the beginning of their story, but you still have a chance to be in the next chapter." And for the first time in years, Lucas Hartman believed that maybe, just maybe, he could write something worth reading. Lucas didn't return to New York that night. Instead, he checked into a small hotel just outside of Providence, a quiet place overlooking the water. He needed the stillness, needed the room to breathe, to reflect. The faces of the girls lingered in his mind. The way Sadie had smiled with ease, how Sophie seemed to analyze everything around her, and how Serena's eyes held a depth that went far beyond her age. They weren't just beautiful, they were brilliant, distinct, real, and they were his. He hardly slept. Instead, he opened his laptop and began digging, not into financial reports or quarterly forecasts, but into parenting guides, child psychology resources, books on single fatherhood. He bookmarked articles on bonding with children, rebuilding relationships, and understanding grief in kids. It was a world completely foreign to him, but for once, he didn't care about being an expert. He just wanted to be present. The next few days followed a rhythm. He would visit the girls under Charlotte's watchful eye. They would read books, go on short walks, or draw together at the kitchen table. Lucas never pushed. He never asked too many questions. He simply showed up, listened, and offered warmth where he could. And they responded. Slowly, the invisible walls began to lower. Sadie was always the first to greet him, always with a question or a drawing to share. Sophie warmed up in her own time, She enjoyed teaching Lucas obscure facts she learned from science books. Serena remained the quietest, the one who watched from a few steps back. But even she had started to offer soft smiles that melted Lucas's heart in ways he didn't expect. Each time he returned to the penthouse in Manhattan for meetings or board calls, he found himself restless. The city felt louder than before, the glass and marble colder. The skyline that had once filled him with pride now looked like nothing compared to the way Sadie's eyes lit up when he read her a story, or how Sophie furrowed her brow in concentration during a puzzle. Even Serena's silence felt more comforting than the endless noise of power and money. It wasn't just that he had daughters, it was that, somehow, without knowing it, he had become a father. And now, he had to find a way to earn that role. One rainy afternoon, Charlotte asked him to come a little earlier. The girls had brought home a flyer from school. They were part of a holiday craft fair, and their class was doing a performance. She thought they might want him there. Lucas sat in the back of the multi-purpose room, surrounded by parents with cell phones and toddlers with sticky fingers. He felt out of place in his tailored coat and leather shoes, but when the triplets walked on stage, his world narrowed to just them. They performed a short poem, each reciting one stanza. Sadie's voice was confident, bright. Sophie was careful and precise. Serena, surprisingly, was the loudest of the three, and by the time they bowed, Lucas was on his feet, clapping harder than anyone else in the room. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Sadie ran to him, her arms flung wide. "You came!" she shouted. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, kneeling to her level. Sophie handed him a paper star she had made. "For you," she said simply. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick. Serena didn't say anything at first, but then she stepped forward and slipped her small hand into his. And just like that, something shifted. He didn't need them to call him Dad. Not yet. This was enough. For now. Later that night, Charlotte poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one to Lucas. The girls had gone to bed, and the house had quieted. Rain tapped against the windows. "You're doing better than I thought," she said. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "But you're showing up," she replied. "And that's more than most." Lucas sipped the tea. "Do you think Eva ever meant to tell me?" Charlotte hesitated. "She wrote letters. Every year, on the girls' birthdays. She never sent them, but she kept them. I think part of her wanted to, but she was afraid that you'd reject them, that you'd come and go." Lucas looked down at his hands. "I would have stayed. If I had known, I would have stayed." Charlotte studied him. "That's easy to say now." "I know, but I mean it." She nodded, then stood. She walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a small wooden box. "I've been holding on to this since the funeral," she said. "I think she'd want you to have it." Inside were photos. Eva in the hospital, smiling with the newborn girls. Pictures of their first birthdays, first days of school, messy art projects. Lucas felt the years crash down on him all at once. So many moments missed. So many stories he wasn't part of. At the bottom of the box was an envelope, unsealed. He recognized the handwriting immediately. "To Lucas," it said. His hands trembled as he opened it. Lucas unfolded the letter slowly, as though any sudden movement might erase the words written inside. The paper was worn at the edges, slightly yellowed, like it had been held and reheld many times. He recognized the handwriting instantly, Eva's looping cursive, both elegant and unfiltered, like her. Lucas, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and that somewhere, somehow, the truth has made its way back to you. I don't know what brought you here. Maybe Charlotte, maybe Delia, maybe a sense you couldn't explain. Whatever it is, I'm grateful. Not for me, for them. Their names are Sadie, Sophie, and Serena. And yes, they are yours. Every part of them. I didn't tell you when I found out I was pregnant. I was angry. But mostly, I was scared. You had your path carved out so clearly. I saw it in your eyes, in the way you looked past everything that wasn't your future. I didn't want to derail you. I didn't want to be the woman who made you choose between love and legacy. So I made the choice for both of us. Was it fair? Maybe not. But I have no regrets. Not when it comes to them. They are everything. If you choose to know them, please do it slowly. They don't need a savior. They need someone who listens. Someone who sees them. Not just as daughters, but as themselves. And if you walk away again, don't come back. They've already survived one goodbye. They won't survive another. I hope this reaches you in time. I hope you're different now. I hope you're ready. Eva. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. Ready? He wasn't sure what that meant anymore. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to walk away this time. Not again. He placed the letter back in the box, then stood and walked quietly down the hallway. The girl's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Inside, he could see the soft outlines of 3 small beds, 3 sleeping figures, 3 breathing miracles, wrapped in blankets and innocence. He didn't step inside. Not yet. Instead, he whispered, more to the darkness than to them, I'm here. I'm staying. I promise. He turned and walked away, letting the tears fall freely now. No boardroom, no press, no power plays. Just a man in a black coat, finally learning what it meant to be a father. A stranger at the edge of belonging. There were 3 small shoes lined up just inside the front door, one with pink glitter peeling at the edges, one with blue laces tied too tight, and one with a purple butterfly stitched into the side. Lucas Hartman stared at them longer than he meant to. They were so ordinary, yet somehow those shoes carried more weight than any billion-dollar deal he'd ever negotiated. This wasn't Wall Street. This was something else entirely. This was someone's home. Eva's home. Her daughter's home. When Charlotte opened the door, she didn't ask him why he was early. She simply stepped aside to let him in. The warmth of the house hit him immediately. The soft scent of cinnamon and crayons. The muffled sound of laughter upstairs. The comfort of lived-in walls. He hadn't felt something like this in a long time. Maybe ever. They're working on a school project, Charlotte said, closing the door behind him. A heritage board. They have to write about where they come from. Lucas's throat tightened. Do they ask about their father? Charlotte nodded, moving toward the kitchen. Not often, but lately, yes. Sadie's the most vocal. Sophie tries to piece things together logically. Serena doesn't ask much. She listens. He followed her. Have you told them anything? Only what Eva said I could tell them. That he was someone she once loved. That he left for a life far away. That she chose to raise them alone. Lucas leaned against the counter. I want to tell them the truth, but not yet. Not until they're ready. Charlotte handed him a cup of tea. Then you'll need to earn your place in their story. Not as their father, not at first, as someone who shows up, every time. Upstairs, footsteps thundered. Then laughter. Then a door creaked open, and 3 pairs of feet came flying down the stairs. Sadie saw him first. "You're early. I wanted to see what you're working on," Lucas said. "If that's okay." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Do you know anything about Scottish history?" Lucas smiled. "A little." Sadie tugged on his sleeve. "We each get a section of the board. I'm writing about Mom's favorite food. She liked things with too many spices. Sophie's doing maps. Serena's drawing the castle we saw in a book." Serena held up a folded sheet, a sketch of a craggy hilltop castle, half in ruins, with stars in the sky behind it. Lucas bent slightly. "That's beautiful," she nodded. "Mom said we came from dreamers and rebels." Lucas felt something sharp and warm pierce through his chest. That sounds like her. For the next hour, he sat with them on the floor, surrounded by glue sticks, glitter, and cut-up magazines. Sophie asked him to look up clan symbols on his phone. Sadie quizzed him on Gaelic words she had scribbled on a flashcard. Serena barely spoke, but when Lucas handed her a reference book on Scottish castles he had brought with him, she offered a soft thank you and returned to her drawing. Charlotte watched from the dining room. She didn't interfere. She didn't need to. Later, as the girls ran off to get ready for dinner, Lucas remained behind, helping clean up the mess. He gathered stray scraps of paper and tucked unused stickers back into their plastic sleeves. Charlotte stepped in beside him. "They like you." Lucas kept his eyes on the table. "I'm afraid of the day they find out who I really am." Charlotte nodded. "You're not the only one, but children aren't made of glass. They're made of truth. Eventually, they'll want the whole story." That night, Lucas didn't return to Manhattan. He booked a room in a small inn 10 minutes away and spent the evening walking the quiet streets of Providence, thinking about the girls, about Eva, about the version of his life that might have been if he'd stayed, not as punishment, but as reflection. He had once believed legacy was built in offices, in global deals, in marble towers with your name etched in glass. Now he wasn't so sure. 3 days later, Charlotte called him. "They've invited you to their school fair," she said. "They're performing." Lucas felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Pride, maybe, or disbelief. "Should I bring flowers?" "Bring yourself," Charlotte said. "That's more than enough." The school auditorium was crowded with folding chairs and parents holding cell phones. The buzz of nervous energy filled the air. Lucas sat in the back, his coat folded neatly over his lap. He didn't want to be seen. He only wanted to see them. The curtain rose on a small stage where the class stood in 2 rows. The triplets were in the center, side by side, their hair braided, their hands clasped. Each wore a different color. Sadie in red, Sophie in green, Serena in yellow. They recited a poem, 1 line each, then together. Their voices weren't loud, but they were sure. Lucas didn't breathe the whole time. When it ended, the applause was loud, but all Lucas heard was the beating of his own heart. After the performance, in the hallway outside the gym, the girls spotted him. "You came," Sadie said, racing up to him. Lucas knelt slightly. "Of course." Sophie handed him a small program with their names circled in marker. "Next time we have a show, you have to sit closer." Serena didn't say anything, but she reached into her pocket and handed him a folded paper. He opened it. It was a tiny version of her drawing from earlier, the castle beneath the stars. Lucas met her eyes. "Thank you," he said. "I'll keep it safe." That night, back in his hotel room, Lucas placed the drawing on the nightstand beside him. He turned off his phone, let the darkness settle, and stared at the ceiling. They trusted him. They didn't know who he was. Not really. But they trusted the man they were beginning to know. That terrified him more than anything else, because when the truth finally came out, and he knew it would, he wouldn't just be the man in the black coat anymore. He'd be the father who hadn't been there. He had to be someone else by then, someone worthy. Over the next few weeks, Lucas became a regular part of their lives. He picked the girls up from school once a week. He took them to a planetarium exhibit, to a book fair, to a movie they had begged Charlotte to let them see. He never crossed boundaries. He never stayed too late, but he showed up, always. He learned the rhythm of their voices. Sadie talked with her hands. Sophie liked to whisper facts during lulls in conversation, and Serena hummed quietly when she drew. He noticed how they sometimes spoke in half sentences that only they understood, how they moved together in perfect sync, but were also fiercely independent. He learned that Sadie was afraid of thunderstorms, that Sophie hated onions, and that Serena collected smooth stones from the park near their house. Lucas started keeping a notebook, not for business plans or appointments, but for them. Page 1, Sadie, bold, quick to laugh, loves jumping games, dislikes silence. Sophie, analytical, precise, likes symmetry, memorizes things quickly. Serena, sensitive, quiet, observes before she speaks, draws constantly. He added to it every day. One Friday evening, Charlotte invited him to stay for dinner. It was spaghetti night, a tradition Eva had started when the girls were toddlers. At the table, Sadie recounted a story from school about a boy who put glue in his own hair by accident. Sophie corrected her timeline. Serena giggled behind her napkin. Lucas watched them. A fork full of pasta paused midair. "I can't believe how much of Eva is in them," he said. Charlotte looked at him carefully. "They carry her everywhere. And maybe, just maybe, a little of you too." Later, as the girls got ready for bed, Serena appeared by his side, clutching a drawing. She didn't say anything, just placed it in his hand and walked away. He opened it. It was of 4 figures now, not 3, standing beneath a starry sky. One of them was taller, standing just behind the others, a hand stretched out, gently resting on their shoulders. Lucas stared at it for a long time. That night, for the first time in years, he slept soundly and dreamed of a future he had never known he wanted, but now couldn't imagine living without. The questions they didn't know how to ask. Lucas Hartman stood outside the school gymnasium, a thin layer of frost clinging to the hood of his coat. The early December air was sharp, the kind that made your breath visible and your thoughts quiet. Inside, the walls echoed with the sound of children laughing, sneakers squeaking on the floor, and the chaos of after-school activity. But out here, it was still. He wasn't sure why he had come so early. The triplets' art show didn't begin for another 45 minutes. Maybe it was habit. Lucas was always early to meetings. Or maybe it was because, lately, being near them felt like the only thing that made sense. He watched through the glass as Sadie, Sophie, and Serena buzzed around a long table covered in art supplies. They were setting up their section with a seriousness that felt larger than their age. Each had decorated her own display board. Sadie's was loud and colorful. Sophie's was neatly labeled. Serena's was quiet, understated, and moving. Lucas didn't realize Charlotte was beside him until she spoke. "You look like a man waiting to be graded." Lucas smiled. "Maybe I am." She didn't return the smile immediately. Instead, she looked through the window, her expression unreadable. They're starting to talk more. About me? About everything, Charlotte said. Sadie asked me if I thought their mom had secrets. Sophie made a list of reasons why people lie. Serena? She hesitated. Serena drew a picture. Lucas turned to her. It was of a man, Charlotte said softly, standing just outside a circle of 3 girls. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Lucas swallowed hard. I think it's time to prepare for the questions, she said. He nodded slowly. I've thought about telling them every day, and every day, I don't. Why not? Because once they know, everything changes. Charlotte looked at him. It already has. Inside, the girls were lining up their artwork now, glancing toward the door, searching. When they spotted him, Sadie waved so hard she nearly knocked over her own project. He waved back. The art show was chaotic and beautiful. Parents jostled for space, teachers tried to keep order, and children ran freely, their voices bouncing off the cinder block walls. Lucas stayed close to the girls' display, letting them lead. Sadie showed him a painting of a fox with wings. It's not real, but I wished it was, so I made it real. Sophie had built a 3D paper model of a wind turbine. It generates imaginary electricity, she said deadpan. Serena's drawing was simple. 3 girls walking up a hill toward a tree that stretched into the stars. She always draws us like that, Sadie said. Together, but different. Lucas knelt down, looking closely. It's beautiful. Serena didn't say anything, but she handed him a smaller version, folded in 4. You can keep it. He took it gently. I will. Later, while Charlotte spoke with another teacher, the girls sat with Lucas on the bleachers, sipping juice boxes and crunching crackers. Sadie leaned in first. So, you really knew our mom? Lucas nodded. Yes. Did you ever see her dance? She asked. Once. A long time ago. She danced barefoot in the rain. Sadie's eyes lit up. She used to do that with us. Sophie was watching him, her brows slightly furrowed. Did you ever come to our house before she got sick? No, Lucas said carefully. Not this house. Did you send letters? Sophie asked. He hesitated. No, he admitted, but I wish I had. They were quiet for a moment. Then Serena spoke. Did she love you? Lucas looked into her eyes, so much like Eva's, and felt the world tilt slightly. Yes, he said quietly, and I loved her. Sophie looked away. Sadie was still. Serena, as always, just watched. Charlotte returned then, sensing something had shifted. Time to head out, girls. The ride back was quiet. That night, Lucas sat in his hotel room, staring at Serena's folded drawing. He unfolded it again, even though he had memorized every line. He didn't sleep. He barely moved. When the sun began to rise, casting a faint glow over the city, he knew. He couldn't wait for the perfect moment. He had to tell them, or he'd lose them before he ever truly had them. He picked up his phone. Charlotte, he said when she answered, I need to talk to them. To all of you. Can I come over tonight? There was a pause. Come at 6. Dinner was already on the table when he arrived. Lasagna, garlic bread, a salad no one really touched. The girls were quieter than usual, glancing at him, then at each other, as if they already knew something was different. After they finished, Charlotte sent them to wash their hands and clear their plates. When they returned, Lucas was sitting on the couch, the folded drawing in his lap. Can we talk for a few minutes? He asked gently. They nodded. Charlotte sat nearby, not as a participant, but as a safety net. Lucas took a breath. I told you before that I knew your mother, that we were close, that she meant a lot to me. 3 small faces stared back. There's more to that story, he said. More that I've been scared to tell you. Sadie sat forward. Sophie crossed her arms. Serena held perfectly still. Lucas continued. Your mother and I were together a long time ago, before you were born. We loved each other very much, but I left. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about you. Not until the funeral, Sophie said. He nodded. Not until then. There was silence. So much of it. It felt like sound. I'm your father, Lucas said softly. All 3 of you. I am your dad. Sadie blinked. Sophie stared at the floor. Serena looked at Charlotte. I didn't come here to take anything from you, he said. I came because when I saw you, I felt something I couldn't explain. And when I learned the truth, I knew I had to stay. Why didn't she tell you? Sadie whispered. She wanted to protect you, Charlotte said. She didn't want you to grow up wondering why he didn't come. She thought it was better to let you believe he was part of the past. She was right, Sophie said sharply. Because now everything's confusing. Lucas nodded. I know. I wish I could fix that, but I can't change the past. All I can do is be here. From now on, if you'll let me. No one spoke. Then Sadie stood up. She walked over to the table, grabbed a napkin, and started folding it. Sophie was frowning, arms crossed. But Serena walked over to Lucas and sat beside him. You kept my drawing, she said quietly. He nodded. Do you still want to come to my recital? She asked. Yes, he said, more than anything. She nodded, then leaned her head lightly against his arm. Not fully, just enough. Charlotte exhaled. Sadie watched. Sophie turned her head away, but not in rejection. Just retreat. They didn't run. That was something. In the weeks that followed, everything changed, and nothing did. Lucas kept coming. He helped with homework, walked them home from school, stayed for movie nights. He didn't push. He didn't claim. He simply stayed. Sadie warmed up first, in her own way. One Saturday morning, as they made pancakes together, she handed him the whisk and said, You can be the official stirrer, but you have to take the job seriously. Sophie took longer. She tested him, asked impossible questions, made him earn every word. One night, while helping her with a math problem, she asked, Do you have other kids? No, he said. Would you want more? I don't need more, he answered. I already have 3. She didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. And Serena never left. Not really. She stayed close, in the way quiet children do. Not loud, not dramatic, but always there, drawing, watching, leaning slightly toward the person who makes her feel safe. One day, she handed him a new drawing. It was of the same hill and the same stars. But this time, the man wasn't standing at the edge. He was holding their hands, the space between us. The truth was out. And yet, everything felt more fragile than before. Lucas Hartman had told them. He had spoken the words aloud, bracing for whatever came next. The weight of it had been immense, like opening a door that could never be closed again. But now that the truth hung in the air between them, silence had taken its place. Days passed, not with shouting or rejection, but with distance. The girls didn't ask many questions, not directly, but they looked at him differently. Sadie had grown quieter, Sophie had grown sharper, and Serena, once his silent shadow, had drifted into a watchful stillness. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Charlotte noticed it too. "They're adjusting," she told him one evening as they stood on the back porch, the winter wind threading between them. Grief isn't just about losing someone. Sometimes it's about finding someone too late. Lucas stared into the bare branches of the oak tree at the edge of the yard. "I keep thinking, maybe I should have waited longer." "No," Charlotte said. "You did what you needed to do. But now comes the harder part." "What's that?" "Staying, even when they don't make room for you." Inside, the girls were watching a movie. Lucas had brought their favorite, the one Eva used to watch with them every Christmas. He'd hoped it would be a way back in, but tonight they didn't invite him to sit. So he stood behind the couch for a few minutes, then quietly stepped away. He had to remind himself, they didn't owe him love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He was not there to be celebrated. He was there to be steady. The next morning, Lucas showed up at their house at 7 a.m. with bagels and hot cocoa. It was snowing lightly. The city hadn't fully woken up yet, but the kitchen lights were already on. Charlotte blinked at him when she opened the door. "Am I late?" he asked, holding up the bag of bagels. She smirked. "No, just wildly early." The girls came downstairs slowly, their footsteps hesitant. Sadie sniffed the air first. "Are those cinnamon raisin?" Lucas nodded. "And chocolate chip, just in case." They sat at the table. No one spoke much, but no one left. When Serena reached for a second cocoa, Lucas poured it for her. Sadie was the first to break the quiet. "You don't have to keep showing up like this." Lucas paused. "Why not?" "Because it's weird now," she said. "Before, you were just visiting. Now you're supposed to be something else." Sophie nodded, but didn't look up from her notebook. Lucas took a slow breath. "You're right. It is different. But I'm not here because I feel like I have to be." "Then why?" Sophie asked flatly. "Because I want to be, not just as your dad, but as someone who cares about you. Each of you. I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's where I'd like to start." They didn't respond, but they didn't argue either. After breakfast, Sadie brought her plate to the sink without being asked. Sophie went upstairs with her journal. Serena lingered, tracing her finger along the edge of her mug. "I used to wonder," she said quietly. Lucas turned. "Wonder what?" "If we had a dad, what he would be like. But I stopped wondering after a while." "Why?" "Because Mom was enough." Lucas nodded. "She really was." Serena looked up at him. "So now I'm wondering again." It wasn't a rejection. It was honesty. And it gave him hope. Later that week, Lucas offered to drive them to ballet class. Charlotte had a work emergency, and the girls were already dressed and ready, their hair pulled back into buns, coats zipped tight. The car ride was tense at first. No music, no chatter. But halfway there, Sadie suddenly said, "Do you even know what a plié is?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. "A pastry?" She groaned. "No, it's like the first thing you learn in ballet. I guess I need a lesson then." At the stoplight, she turned toward him. "If you're gonna be around, you should probably know some things." "Agreed," he said. "Okay. Number 1, never tie Serena's ribbons too tight. Number 2, Sophie hates when people clap off beat. And number 3, she paused dramatically, don't ever mix up our shoes." Lucas chuckled. "Understood." Sophie, from the back seat, added dryly, "Also, ballet recitals are sacred." "I'm taking notes," Lucas said. The tension cracked, just slightly, like ice warming under a soft sun. At the studio, Lucas waited in the lobby with other parents. He watched through the glass as the girls practiced, so different in their movements, yet perfectly synchronized. Sadie, fierce and free. Sophie, controlled and focused. Serena, fluid like water. One of the other mothers leaned over. "Which one's yours?" Lucas blinked. "They're all yours?" she asked, surprised. He nodded softly. "Yes, all three." The words felt strange, but right. The next weekend, the girls came to his apartment for the first time since learning the truth. He had prepared carefully. 3 bedrooms, each personalized just enough. Bookshelves, art supplies, a telescope, ballet posters, bean bags in their favorite colors. The kitchen had their favorite snacks. There was even a puppy-themed doormat Sadie had pointed out in a catalog. Still, he was nervous. They arrived with backpacks and skeptical eyes. "You don't have to like it," he told them, "but I hope you'll feel comfortable here." They walked through the rooms slowly, touched things, tried light switches, sat on beds. Lucas waited. Eventually, Serena opened the window blinds in her room and said, "I like the view." Sophie tested the desk drawer. "This fits my journals." Sadie opened her closet and shouted, "There's a beanbag with my name on it." Lucas smiled. That night, they made popcorn and watched movies on the couch. Sadie fell asleep halfway through. Serena curled up next to her. Sophie stayed awake the longest, eyes fixed on the screen. When Lucas carried the twins to bed, Sophie followed behind him and whispered, "You don't have to try so hard." He looked at her. "I'm not trying to impress you." "I know," she said. "That's why it's working." She walked away before he could respond. He stood in the hallway long after they'd gone to bed, the silence settling around him like a blanket. He wasn't sure if they trusted him yet, but they didn't ask him to leave. And maybe, for now, that was enough. His name on the sign-in sheet. The hallway smelled like glue sticks and pencil shavings. A familiar, almost nostalgic scent that Lucas Hartman hadn't encountered in decades. He stood awkwardly at the entrance to PS 87's main office, holding a small stack of permission slips and a note from Charlotte that simply said, "Time to step in." The school secretary, a woman with horn-rimmed glasses and a clipboard of authority, looked him up and down. "Name?" she asked. "Lucas Hartman." She flipped a page. "And you're here for?" "Sadie, Sophie, and Serena Langston." That gave her pause. She glanced over her glasses. "Are you Mr. Langston?" "No," Lucas said quietly. "I'm their father." The words came out steadier than he expected, but it still felt like walking on unfamiliar ground. The secretary hesitated, then pointed toward a clipboard. "You'll need to sign in. Room 214. Parent-teacher conferences are staggered by last name. You're a little early." Lucas scrawled his name. Seeing it there, on a sheet beneath dozens of other parents, felt surreal, like he was borrowing a life that didn't quite belong to him. A father's life. The hallway outside room 214 was lined with art. Drawings of volcanoes, watercolor rainbows, poems about pets. Lucas spotted 3 drawings immediately. They weren't labeled by name, but he knew. Sadie's was an explosion of color and gold glitter. Sophie's was measured, symmetrical, every inch accounted for. Serena's had no people, no sun, just a tree in winter, bare and still. The door opened. A woman in her 30s stepped out, holding a file and adjusting her scarf. "Mr. Hartman?" He straightened. "Yes, I'm Miss Medina," she said, offering her hand. "I have the triplets this year." He followed her into the classroom, which was dimly lit and smelled faintly of dry erase markers. Desks were arranged in clusters. A corner was set up as a reading nook. There was a quote on the wall in bold letters. "Mistakes are proof you are trying." Lucas sat. "I'll be honest," Miss Medina said as she flipped open her folder. "When I saw your name on the conference schedule, I had to double-check. I didn't know the girl's father was involved." "I wasn't," Lucas admitted. "Until recently." She nodded slowly. "They're incredible kids. Smart, kind, very different from each other, which is impressive, considering how closely people tend to group multiples together." "I've noticed that too," he said. "I'm still learning who they are." She smiled. "Then you're doing something right." They went over academic progress, Sophie's advanced reading level, Sadie's fearless imagination, Serena's quiet but poignant writing. Miss Medina paused at one point and said, "They're adjusting well, considering the loss of their mother. But there's one thing I wanted to bring up." Lucas leaned forward. "Sadie's been getting into arguments during recess. Sophie's become very corrective, especially with teachers. And Serena, she stopped turning in her weekly reflections. She says there's nothing to say." Lucas felt his heart sink. "They're good kids," Ms. Medina emphasized. "But they're grieving, and grief looks different for every child." He nodded. "Is there anything I can do?" "Just keep showing up," she said. "Let them feel seen. Let them feel safe." As Lucas left the classroom, he passed another parent in the hallway, a tall man in a sharp coat who glanced at him with mild curiosity. Lucas knew that look. It was the same one he used to give at corporate galas, assessing value, power, presence. He didn't care anymore. He walked the hallway slowly, passing by bulletin boards, reading names, faces, fragments of lives. He saw a photo of Sadie smiling with her class during a science project, Sophie shaking hands with a local councilwoman during a school event, Serena sitting cross-legged on the floor in art class, sketching with total focus. They had lived whole lives without him, and still, they had room to grow more, with him now beside them. That evening, Lucas waited outside the school entrance. The triplets were walking home with Charlotte, but had agreed he could join them for the last few blocks. He held their favorite cookies in a paper bag, uncertain whether today was the kind of day they'd want cookies. When they emerged, he could tell something was off. Sadie's coat was unzipped, and her brow was furrowed. Sophie was clenching a piece of paper. Serena walked a few steps behind them, head down. "What happened?" Lucas asked, matching their pace. Sadie spoke first. "Some kid in class said Mom died because she didn't have a husband to help her. That if she'd had a real family, she wouldn't have gotten sick." Lucas stopped walking. "What?" "He said it loud," Sophie added. "To the whole class." Lucas clenched the bag so tightly, the cookies crumbled inside. "And what did you say?" he asked. "I told him to shut up," Sadie said. "Then I kicked over his Lego tower." Charlotte winced. "And now we're supposed to have a meeting with the principal." Lucas crouched to face her. "You did what you thought was right. But next time, let me help." "Why?" Sadie snapped. "So you can talk to a principal who doesn't even know who you are? So you can tell some other dad not to raise a jerk of a son? You're late, remember?" Lucas didn't flinch. "Yes, I'm late, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Sadie didn't respond. She just walked ahead. Sophie handed him the crumpled paper. It was the referral slip for Sadie's behavior. "You should sign it," she said. "It's your job now." He nodded and took it. When they reached the corner, Serena paused beside him. "Mom wouldn't have cared about the Lego tower," she said softly. "She would have hugged Sadie anyway." Lucas knelt. "So will I." She leaned into him, just slightly, then followed her sisters. That night, Lucas wrote an email to the school principal. It was calm, direct, firm. He explained the situation, asked for empathy, requested a meeting. Then he signed it. Lucas Hartman, father of Sadie, Sophie, and Serena Langston. And when he hit send, he felt it deep in his chest. Not just responsibility, belonging, a letter from the past. The idea came to Lucas one afternoon as he passed a small travel agency near Central Park. He hadn't noticed it before. Just a narrow glass door tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. A poster in the window showed a lake surrounded by trees in full autumn fire, and something about it stopped him. He stepped inside and asked the woman at the desk, "Do you know any quiet places not too far from the city, good for a weekend trip with kids?" She smiled. "You looking for fun or something softer?" "Something real," he said. 2 weeks later, Lucas stood outside Charlotte's brownstone, the black SUV parked by the curb, its trunk filled with backpacks, sleeping bags, marshmallows, coloring books, and enough snacks to survive a week in the woods. Sadie was the first to bolt out the door. "Shotgun! You said I could have shotgun this time!" Sophie shouted behind her. Serena followed with her usual calm, wearing a purple beanie and clutching a small cloth bag she never went anywhere without. Inside it were her sketchbook, 3 smooth stones, and, unknown to everyone, a small, leather-bound journal that had once belonged to her mother. Charlotte emerged last, carrying a thermos and giving Lucas a look that said both "good luck" and "don't screw this up." "They've never done a trip like this," she said. "I haven't either," Lucas admitted. "They'll remember everything," she added, and kissed each girl on the forehead. As they pulled away, Lucas looked in the rearview mirror and saw Charlotte watching them from the sidewalk. Her figure grew smaller, but her words stayed with him. "They'll remember everything." The drive was long enough for them to sing 3 songs, argue about whose turn it was, to pick music, play I Spy, and fall into a rare moment of synchronized silence when they spotted deer near the tree line. The cabin was nestled near a lake in the Hudson Valley. It had no television, limited cell service, and a fireplace that hadn't been used in years. Lucas had brought firewood, just in case. "This is like a horror movie," Sophie muttered as she opened the creaky screen door. "No, it's like an adventure," Sadie corrected, already kicking off her boots. Serena wandered to the window and stared at the water, then down at her bag. She didn't say a word. Lucas showed them the bunk beds, the pantry, and the bathroom with questionable water pressure. He gave them flashlights and let them argue over who got the top bunk. Eventually, Sadie and Sophie claimed the top bunks in a truce of mutual exhaustion, and Serena settled into the bottom bed by the window. That evening, they built a fire. Sadie threw in dry leaves. Sophie calculated the best way to stack the logs. Serena just watched, quiet, arms wrapped around her knees. Lucas handed them each a stick and marshmallows. "I never thought you'd know how to build a fire," Sadie said. "I Googled it," Lucas replied. She laughed. It was the first time she'd laughed all day. Later, with their cheeks pink and their clothes smelling like smoke. The girls curled up with blankets as Lucas read aloud from a worn book of fairy tales he'd found in the cabin's bookshelf. "I like your voice when you read," Serena said softly. "It's calm." Lucas looked over. "Your mom used to read to you, didn't she?" Serena nodded. "But she used funny voices. You don't do voices." "I can try." She smiled, the rare kind of smile that flickered, then stayed. The next morning, Sophie was digging through the small shelf beside her bed when she found the book. It was tucked between old paperbacks, a green leather cover with no title. She opened it, expecting it to be blank. Instead, she found Eva's handwriting. She turned pages carefully. There were recipes, lists of books to read, observations about the girls. Then, near the middle, a folded note addressed to the girls. Or maybe Lucas, if he ever finds this. Sophie stared at it, frozen. She walked it to the breakfast table and placed it in front of Lucas without a word. He looked at her, then down at the letter. Serena came over, saw the journal, and sat beside him. Sadie stood near the counter, chewing a piece of toast slowly. Lucas unfolded the letter. It was dated 5 years earlier. "If you're reading this, then something has brought you back to each other. Lucas, I always wondered if the truth would find you, or if you'd find it. I didn't keep them from you out of anger. I kept them from you out of fear. Fear that you wouldn't stay. Fear that you'd try to fix everything and forget that they're not problems to be solved. They're people to be loved. And girls, if this letter ends up in your hands before I could tell you everything, I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you from hurt, but I know that silence can hurt too. You have your father's eyes, and more than that, his mind, his questions, his fire. If he's here now, then I believe he's changed, and I hope you'll give him the space to grow into who he can still become, because you don't need a perfect father. You just need one who stays. Love, Mom." Lucas didn't speak. His throat tightened. The girls were still, as if the letter had drawn a circle around them that no one dared to step out of. Sadie was the first to speak. "She really thought about all of it." Lucas nodded. "She always did." Sophie looked down at her lap. "You're not perfect." "No," Lucas agreed. "Not even close." "But you're still here," she said. Serena reached for his hand, small fingers curling around his. And then, without fanfare, she whispered, "Dad?" Lucas turned to her, stunned. "What did you say?" She looked up at him. "Can I call you that? Just sometimes?" He nodded, too choked up to speak. Sadie came around the table and leaned into his shoulder. "I guess we can start there," she said. Sophie didn't move, but she didn't leave. That night, as they roasted marshmallows again under a sky full of stars, Lucas felt something shift, something deep and permanent. Not forgiveness, not yet, but belonging. And that, he knew, was enough to build everything else on. The weight of their names. It started with a form, a simple sheet of paper from the school nurse, requesting updated emergency contact information. Lucas glanced at the line that asked for parent/guardian name, and for the first time, he didn't hesitate. He wrote, Lucas Hartman, relationship, father. He stared at the signature line for a long moment. Then he signed it. It was the first time he had ever written that word on a legal form. Not just visitor, not family friend, but father. There was no turning back from it, and he didn't want to. Charlotte met him at the school gate, I just got off the phone with Family Services, she said. They've reviewed your petition for guardianship. The judge wants to meet with all of us. Lucas nodded. He had expected it. Eva hadn't left a formal will. There were no custody arrangements, only the trust Charlotte had honored for years. But now that Lucas was stepping into this role fully, it needed to be official. The girls know? He asked. They do, Charlotte replied. Serena cried. Sophie researched the New York State process for legal guardianship and highlighted inconsistencies in the paperwork. Sadie asked if it meant you'd be allowed to ground them now. He smiled faintly. And are you okay with it? Charlotte looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. They're your daughters, Lucas, but they're also Eva's. Just don't forget that part. 2 weeks later, they sat in a quiet, wood-paneled family courtroom. The girls each held a small object for comfort. Sadie, a keychain from their last museum trip. Sophie, a notepad filled with facts she might need to defend their position. And Serena, the same leather-bound journal they had found at the cabin. The judge was kind-eyed but firm. He asked Lucas why now, after all these years. Lucas answered truthfully, because I didn't know before. And once I did, I chose them. I'll keep choosing them. Every day. He didn't need to say more. An hour later, it was official. Lucas Hartman was not just their father in name. He was their legal guardian. He drove them to a small diner afterward. Pancakes and milkshakes to celebrate. Serena drew hearts in her whipped cream. Sophie made a toast with her chocolate milk. Sadie asked, "So, if you're our legal guardian, does that mean you're officially in charge?" Lucas raised his eyebrows. "Why? Are you planning a rebellion?" She grinned. "Not yet, but it's good to know who the enemy is." He laughed, and it echoed deeper than he expected. At home, things shifted subtly. Lucas started doing school pickup twice a week. He attended a PTA meeting and listened carefully while another father complained about the fundraising raffle system. Sophie asked him to help with a science fair project. Sadie started calling him Dad in front of her friends, though always casually. And Serena, quietly, began slipping drawings into his briefcase before he left for work. Always signed, "From your daughter." One Saturday morning, Lucas stood in the kitchen in a flour-dusted apron, flipping pancakes that were burning slightly around the edges. "Not bad," Charlotte said, sipping coffee and eyeing the chaos. Lucas shrugged. "They said they wanted animals. I'm trying to make a giraffe." Charlotte peered closer. "Looks like a snail that gave up." The girls laughed. Even Sophie cracked a smile. These were the moments that made everything worth it. Not the courtroom declarations, not the headlines he'd avoided, but this, batter on the counter, music from the living room, laughter like something sacred and wild. Later that day, they went to a bookstore. Each girl got to choose one new book. Serena lingered in the poetry section. Sadie drifted toward fantasy. Sophie weighed the pros and cons of biographies versus physics. Lucas waited patiently, holding their coats, his phone buzzing in his pocket. He didn't look at it. For once, nothing in that world mattered more than this one. But when he got home that night, Charlotte met him at the door, holding her phone. "You need to see this," she said. A photo. It was blurry but unmistakable. Lucas walking through the bookstore, Serena holding his hand. The caption, "Is billionaire investor Lucas Hartman hiding a secret family?" Lucas went cold. He sat on the couch as Charlotte scrolled through the article. It was vague, full of speculation, but the image was damning enough. Someone had recognized him, and the gossip sites had done the rest. "What do I do?" he asked. Charlotte looked at him. "That depends. Are you ready for the world to know?" He didn't answer. Not yet. The next day, Lucas walked the girls to school himself. There were eyes, whispering. Two mothers stopped talking when he passed. The girls noticed. "Why is everyone acting weird?" Sadie asked. Lucas crouched beside them. "Because someone took our picture yesterday and posted it online." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "That's illegal, right?" "Not quite," Lucas said. "But it wasn't right." "Are they going to write lies about us?" Serena whispered. "No," Lucas said firmly. "Not if I tell the truth first." Sadie crossed her arms. "Then tell them." Lucas looked at all three of them. "Can I?" Sophie nodded. Serena gave a small smile. Sadie tilted her chin. "You're our dad. You don't have to hide that anymore." That evening, Lucas sat in his study, laptop open. He didn't call a PR firm. He didn't craft a press release. He opened a blank document and started writing, not to the world, but to the girls. A letter they might read someday. A letter that could live online or disappear without a trace. "I didn't know I had daughters. I didn't know until it was almost too late. But now I do. And I'm not hiding it. They are not a secret. They are the best part of my life. I didn't earn them. I didn't grow with them from the start. But I'm here now. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Ours started later. But that doesn't make it any less real. I am their father, and I'm proud to say so." He posted it quietly. No interviews, no announcement. Just the truth. Within hours, it spread. Comments flooded in. Some kind, some cruel. But Lucas didn't read most of them. He was in the living room, helping Sadie build a fort out of pillows. Sophie peeked out of the hallway. "You're viral." "I know," he said. "You're not freaking out?" "Not if you're not." She thought about that. "Okay." Serena curled into his side and whispered, "You didn't run." "No," he said. "I'm exactly where I want to be." The quiet shape of forever. The cemetery hadn't changed. The iron gates still creaked the same way they had a year ago. The old oak tree still stood tall near the hill's curve, its branches bare but dignified in the soft wind of late March. And the bench, the one where Lucas had sat alone after Eva's funeral, was still there, still cold, still waiting. But this time, he wasn't alone. Sadie walked beside him, her red scarf fluttering behind her like a banner. She was taller now, her step more deliberate, her shoulders squared with purpose. Sophie followed, one hand clutching a folded program from school. She had just presented her first ever debate and had won. She didn't mention it, but Lucas knew she hoped he'd ask. And Serena, always quiet, always watching, held his hand as they climbed the slight slope toward the grave. Charlotte walked a few paces behind them. She no longer hovered like she once did, but her presence remained steady, anchoring them all with quiet reassurance. It had been a year since Eva passed, and somehow an entire lifetime had unfolded in that year. They stood together in front of the headstone. No ceremony, no speeches, just the soft rustle of wind through branches and the occasional chirp of a bird returning too early for spring. Lucas knelt first, setting down a bundle of white tulips, Eva's favorite. Sadie placed a small rock on the headstone, following Jewish tradition they'd researched together. Sophie pulled out a tiny, laminated quote, a line from one of Eva's favorite poets, and slid it beneath a stone to keep it from blowing away. And Serena, without a word, opened her satchel and pulled out Eva's leather journal, the one they had all read pieces of, the one that had traveled between bedrooms, sometimes kept under pillows, sometimes held to the chest during the sleepless nights. She looked up at Lucas. "We want you to keep it now." Lucas blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Mom loved you, and you're part of her story too. It's not just ours anymore." He took it gently, not as something won, but something entrusted. He held it to his chest. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'll take good care of it." Sophie cleared her throat. "I think we should say something. Like, all of us." Lucas stood. "You start." Sophie looked down, then took a breath. "Hi, Mom. I got second place at the science fair, but I didn't cry about it this time. I remembered what you said, that losing with grace is as important as winning with pride." Sadie stepped up. "I learned how to do a cartwheel. Took forever. I think you would have laughed at how many times I landed on my face." Serena spoke last. "I draw different things now. Less stars, more people." Lucas swallowed hard, then said, "We miss you. We're still learning how to do this family thing, but I think you'd be proud of them, of us." They stood in silence for a moment more. Then Sadie said, "Okay, Mom hated sad goodbyes, so let's go." They turned and walked back down the hill, hand in hand, their shadows stretching behind them, separate but connected. The rest of the day was ordinary, wonderfully so. They stopped for lunch at a diner with cracked leather booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. Sophie ordered a grilled cheese and ate it while reading a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Sadie insisted on a milkshake before real food. Serena asked for a blank napkin and drew a picture of them all. This time, seated at a round table, laughing. Lucas looked at the image and smiled. "I don't look that old." "You do," Sadie said. "But it's okay. You're still cool for a dad." When they got home, the girls scattered like birds, returning to a familiar nest. Sophie disappeared into her room with a highlighter and a stack of books. Sadie pulled on rollerblades and practiced in the hallway, narrowly avoiding knocking over a lamp. Serena sat in the living room with her sketchpad, humming to herself. Lucas stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, burning the garlic just a little. A domestic rhythm he'd never imagined himself falling into. Charlotte arrived just before dinner. She handed Lucas a letter. "It's from the school. They want you to speak at Career Day." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You're joking." "Nope. Apparently Serena listed you as her hero on some worksheet and mentioned that you make money appear out of thin air." Lucas laughed. "They're going to be so disappointed." "Maybe not," Charlotte said. "Maybe they'll see a man who built towers and empires, but chose 3 little girls instead." Lucas stared at the paper, quiet. "Are you going to do it?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, as the girls dozed in their beds, each in her own room, each space a reflection of the girl who lived there, Lucas stepped into his study and opened Eva's journal. He flipped to a page in the middle. "I used to believe love had to look a certain way, big, sweeping gestures. But now I think maybe the bravest kind of love is the one that stays, that shows up in the morning and makes lunch and listens to the same story 3 times, just because someone needs to tell it." Lucas closed the book. He understood it now. The kind of love that built forts out of couch cushions, stood in line for school pickups, and kept coming back, even when the welcome was unsure. The kind of love that stays. Months passed. Lucas spoke at Career Day, He brought donuts and used plain words. And Sadie rolled her eyes, but smiled the whole time. Serena beamed. Sophie took notes and challenged him with a question no adult in the room could answer. They spent weekends walking in the park, adopting a one-eyed rescue cat named Comet, and learning how to navigate being a family that didn't always make sense to the world, but made perfect sense to each other. On the first day of summer break, the girls woke Lucas up at 6:30 a.m. with pancakes they'd made themselves. The kitchen was a disaster. The pancakes were uneven, and it was, unquestionably, the best breakfast he'd ever had. That afternoon, they sat on a blanket in Central Park, the sun warm on their faces, a small radio playing songs from Eva's old playlist. Sophie leaned against his arm, half reading, half dozing. Sadie was teaching Serena how to braid, their laughter spilling into the open air. And Lucas closed his eyes and breathed it all in. No headlines, no boardrooms, no fear of running out of time. Just this, just now, just love, quiet, imperfect, and here to stay. Sometimes, life gives us second chances, not in grand, dramatic ways, but in quiet moments that ask us to show up, to stay, and to grow. Lucas Hartman didn't get to see his daughters take their first steps. He missed their first words, their scraped knees, the sleepy bedtime questions that only come when a child trusts you enough to ask. He missed birthdays, tooth fairies, ballet recitals, and parent-teacher conferences. He missed it all until he didn't. Because when life gave him that second chance, a glance across a cemetery, 3 identical girls standing behind an oak tree, he could have walked away, but he didn't. He stayed, awkward, unsure, and terrified of messing everything up, but he stayed. And maybe that's the lesson. Love isn't always loud. It isn't always perfect or poetic. Sometimes it's just presence. Showing up when it matters. Choosing to try, even when it feels too late. Especially when it feels too late. In a world that often moves too fast, chasing success, image, and approval, this story reminds us of what truly matters. The moments around the dinner table, the quiet hugs, the courage to say, "I'm here," and to mean it. So many of us carry regrets about the people we've lost, the time we didn't take, the words we never said. But if there's one thing Lucas and his daughters taught us, it's this: healing is possible. Family can be rebuilt. And no matter how broken the story begins, the ending is still ours to write. You don't need to be a perfect parent, or a perfect child, or a perfect anything. You just need to be willing to listen, to learn, to stay. Eva may have left this world too soon, but her love, quiet, steady, and brave, became the thread that wove them all together. Even in her absence, she guided them toward a future none of them expected, but all of them needed. So maybe today is a good day to reach out, to forgive someone, to open a door you thought had long since closed. Or maybe it's just a good day to tell someone, "I'm proud of you," or "I've missed you," or simply, "I'm here." Because the truth is, we all have the power to be someone's second chance. And sometimes, that second chance is the beginning of something even better than we imagined.